Shawn, thanks for being here. I know we spoke, off camera in a couple weeks ago, and actually it was when I came in for my annual physical, and I've had you on this list, and it was a beautiful conversation. I love your approach. Is I think you spent about 10 minutes going over my blood results, and the rest was just you and I haven't spoke, too in depth about everything that you've been up to with the armory, which we'll get into, just about wellness in general. And gosh, I think I was in there for an hour just catching up about life and health and wellness and physical fitness and just everything. It was an awesome check. It was the best checkup I've ever had.
Well, I appreciate that. I very much enjoyed our conversation too. And I feel like since the last time we talked, in depth and had a chance to sit down, which probably wasn't even at the doctor's office, it was probably at the gym. There've been so many life changes for the both of us, and I kind of look back to my first memory of meeting you is in the gym space, right? Like, I feel like we were both training in the morning and you were with your group of friends and, eventually your group of friends became my group of friends. And I mean, shoot, I don't know how long it was until the topic of what I did for a living even came up. We might have known each other for a year before, we even broached that topic. So like, when I think of you, I think of you as a weightlifting buddy and a friend. And now as we've had more and more conversations and, seeing the path that you're on as a human being and so many things we have in common, it's been really fun for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I agree. I think it was quite some time for, like I said, you were a friend and a guy I just saw at the gym, and then one day was like, oh, Shawn's a doctor, and then, once we'll get into this a little bit, but once it kind of was clear to me, your mission number one and just your drive for overall wellness, and that's been at the forefront of your practice. But I remember when you were talking about those days. Gosh, I think I'd known you for a couple of years, and you walked up to us at the gym one day and you looked around, you said, you know what, guys, I don't know if you remember this. You said, you know what, guys, I think I'm going to buy a bunch of weights and open up a gym. And then you walked away. And we're like, okay. And that was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. And
Um, I'm going to guess that would have been somewhere in 2015, early 2016, right?
yeah.
Um, that's funny. Yeah. Because I remember that too, right? Like I remember my mindset of all that too. So that's hilarious that you bring that up.
So the man of action, here we are again, 8, 9 years later. And not only has your medical practice exploded, but now there's a couple of gyms, which then resulted in the opening of the armory. We'll get into. So it's been fun to watch your journey. Let's kind of take it back, though. What started this whole journey for you? And first and foremost, you went to med school to become a doctor. So kind of take me through. Was that always a dream? Did you know, hey, when I was a little kid, I want to be a doctor, or was it you had an aha moment later in life as a college kid, or how'd that?
Like, no, I think it was what I always thought I was going to do, and I don't know exactly when that happened. It might have been elementary school or middle school, but definitely by high school, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. That was just what I was going to do, and I don't, looking back, I'm not sure what drew me to it. Probably was the science, behind it or working with people or helping people or some combination of the above. But there was never any doubt in my mind that that's what I was going to do, um, so that's kind of how I got my start. And, one of the ways that I always dealt with stress, especially like you're in college and you're in med school and residency and stuff, was just to lift weights. And it was that physical connection where you can kind of go in and zone it all out and just challenge yourself, and crack a sweat, do something hard. And then when you leave the gym, you just feel a little bit better. For me, I just felt like more alive, clearer thoughts, happier. Okay, I'm ready to go now. That was,
Yeah.
something that was important to me. And I just noticed that about myself. So even it's something that even when I had the busiest work weeks of medical school and residency, I just never skipped that because I knew if I did, well, partly I was afraid if I did, I would never start again. But partly I knew that I needed that in order to face the next day. So
Mm.
that's kind of how the fitness part worked into my life. So, the idea when you're growing up, of what a doctor is completely different from what a doctor actually is, So, and I didn't really realize this until, let's call it third year of med school. You're going along, and before that, you're like, I got to have really good grades, and I got to ace the MCAT, and I got to do all these interviews. And then first and second year of med school come along, and you're just studying, right? You're just studying and passing tests. And then somewhere around third year, you go usually into a hospital and you start, seeing what it actually is like to be a doctor. And my first experience was like, whoa, this is not what I had envisioned. I had envisioned like probably some fantasy that happened 50 years ago when you came to the patient's house and you had a nice conversation and they paid you with a goat or something because they didn't have money, right? Like, but it was all about that relationship and helping the person, right? And you get
Right.
in the actual situation, and you realize that's not really a whole lot of what it is. Uh, and it's gotten even worse, but it's turned into this. You have a certain amount of time with a patient, and there's certain things you have to do that's mandated by people outside of the patient and the doctor. And, it was really eye opening to me, to the point where, like, that third, fourth year of med school, I really like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Like, this
Mm,
is not what I thought medicine was going to be. But at that point in time, you're so far in debt that you have to see it through, or you couldn't possibly pay back the student loans. So that was my process, on that journey. And I still would have those interactions with the patients where I was like, man, I really connected with this person. I was able to help this person, but they were fewer and far between than what I would like. And they also, there were so many other rules and regulations about how to provide that it just was not fun. So, I'm kind of like, okay, well, I got to see this through. So you go through residency, and I, trained in internal medicine and finished up in 2004. And I was looking at, okay, I got to go get a job now. And, I was going to stay around in Columbus, and looked at all the practices. And honestly, I didn't really like any of them that were out there. And, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to do my own thing. So my wife and I, we bought an office building and we started a medical practice. And that's kind of how that started, right? So just kind of doing this thing, seeing your patients, and it's traditional insurance-based model. And I liked the patient relationship part of it, but it was all the other things that got in the way because, really, and it took me a few years to get to this point of actually practicing, but you sit back and you look at what healthcare problems people walk in to see their primary care physician for, right? And 85% of those problems are a lifestyle related issue,
wow.
and that number's climbing, right? And, when you start to say, okay, well, what are these lifestyle problems that we're seeing? And it's things like, well, lives are really stressful right now. There's a ton of stress. People don't get good sleep, right? The average American diet is notoriously terrible. Um, the average American does not exercise very much. Average American is considerably overweight, and you start to add up all these things too. And you throw in the things like, okay, well, maybe I'm drinking a little more than I should, or I'm smoking more than I should, or something, putting these toxic chemicals. And the result of, you add all those things up, and you have a population that's not as healthy as it can be. And you have people who maybe aren't as happy or having the quality of life that they could enjoy, had we, a solution to these, type of things. And so then, I kind of look at that as the medical community's role is to help these people, right? And when someone comes into your office and they say, wow, um, now 50 years old, right? And I'm 70 pounds overweight. And, well, as a result, I've got sleep apnea, and I've got diabetes, and I've got high blood pressure, and I've got high cholesterol, and my back hurts and my knee hurts, and then you start, I was sitting there and have that conversation. I'm like, well, gosh, if I could teach this guy or this gal how to eat, right? And I could, well, fix their knee and their back pain so they can start exercise, teach them how to exercise, get that weight off. All of those problems will just resolve themselves. They'll go away. So that's a healthy individual, a healthy, happy individual who has a good quality of life and lower risk moving forward of a whole bunch of other complications, right? But our medical system isn't set up to do that because it's time intensive, it's education intensive. You need a team around you to do that. Our system's set up with, well, on average, you have 10, 15 minutes with a patient. So you only have enough time to cover a little bit. And then you say, okay, well, gosh, you got diabetes and your blood pressure's up and your cholesterol's up. Here's a series of pills that you take, which will lower your blood sugar, will lower your blood pressure, will lower your cholesterol, which might delay the consequences of a heart attack or a stroke or whatever, right? But you didn't fix the underlying problem. That problem still exists. You're just treating, the symptoms and reducing the risks of complications from those. And after doing that for a while, a decade, of doing that, I was just like, I'm not satisfied with this. The system is not what it should be. The system needs to change. But then, and I feel like most doctors would agree with me on these points, right? But then you start to say, how do I change this system, right? I'm just one person. You say, well, then you look at who's in control of this, so you have the big hospital systems, and they're making a lot of money. You look at pharmaceutical companies, and they're doing well, and the big insurance companies are doing well, and governments, move slow, and their motivations aren't always in line either. So then it's like, well, if we're going to change this system, we're going to have to do it ourselves. It's going to have to be a grassroots thing. We're going to have to devise a better system and touch some lives and help them and learn as we go, uh, and perhaps scale this thing, once we show that it's a better model. So and really that vision in my mind started somewhere around 2004, 2005, 2006, but it took a while to get in the position where I could actually act upon it. And that's where we got back to the conversation you and I had in the gym, right? Where I'm like, hey guys, I think I'm going to open a gym. And part of that conversation we had was, I remember the gym we're working out at, and they had, if I remember right, they had one squat rack and a half rack.
Yep.
And at the time, it was the busiest gym in that chain in the country with about 12,000 members, right? So you got 12,000 members in one squat rack, right? And we could never get it, right? So we're
Right.
fighting. And I remember, like, I think the gym opened at 5:30, and there's a line of 20 of us outside the door
Yeah.
to rush in up the stairs so you can get that squat rack first, right? And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? So part of my motivation was, I'm going to open a gym. I'm going to put a bunch of squat racks in it because I'm tired of waiting on this one. But the other part of it was, okay, I got to start doing something about this healthcare problem. So that's how the gym kind of came in. And I'm not exactly sure which one came first. It was probably more the desire for the squat cages and not having to fight you and your clown buddies about who gets there first, right? To the squat cage. That was probably what
Right.
it was. So what we ended up doing is my wife and I said, we live here in Grandview, and we saw these two office spaces next to each other that for rent, and I must have caught her a good day because I'm like, hey Meredith, I got this great idea. And she's like, oh gosh, here we go. So I was like, why don't we lease those two office spaces? I'll move my doctor's office to one, and we'll build a gym in the other one, right? So she said sure, and I was like, okay, let's go. So we built that gym out, we opened it, and about 6 months after opening it, the gym was more profitable than doctor's office, right?
Wow.
So think about that. Like
Wow. Yeah.
a gym that is not staffed, just a 24-hour key card gym is more profitable than a doctor's office, with my whole medical staff grinding like crazy to help people out and going through the insurance model. And I was like, something's not right here. My
Yeah.
first thought was, I think I'm going to be done being a doctor. I'm just going to be in the gym business, But then when I took a deeper breath, I'm like, wait a second. So now I've got this extra profits that I can start to make improvements in how my practice is running, right? So like I can do the things that I wanted to do. I can have a little longer appointments because I don't have to see as many, right? Or I can hire that dietitian, or I can hire that physical therapist because I have some funds to do that. And now we can encourage our patients to get healthy and transition to the gym. And it just took off, right? So it's taken off from there. And that was 2016 when we opened that. And then, so yeah, from that day forward, it's just been constantly looking at this and saying, how can we improve what we're doing? How can we improve the healthcare delivery model? But really, it's when someone walks in the door, how can we sit down, look this person in the eye, get to know them, understanding what their fears are, what their desires are, what makes them tick, right? And what their idea of good health is, what their idea of wellness is, what their idea of fitness is, and then kind of designing a plan that helps them achieve that. Um, and that's really what the fun part is, is look someone in their eyes and say, here's where we are, right? Where you want to go with this, and dream a little bit big, and it might take a little bit of time to get there, but dream big. So then we have this dream, and it might be a 16-month dream. So it's breaking it down to increments that we then can accomplish one check mark along the way until they go from being unhealthy to really healthy. But it's a lot of education, it's a lot of encouragement, it's positive feedback, it's having a plan that works and showing the changes that are occurring. That's pretty much what we're doing at the Armory, which is our the newest facility we have, which is this culmination of this 20-year dream that we've had.
Yeah, you gosh, you covered so much valuable information there. And I guess to back up a little bit, Shawn, first of all, what an amazing risk that you took to, I guess the gym was already profitable, like you said, but to bet on yourself. I think that's the most inspirational part about what you said, that what you didn't directly say, but indirectly is you did it for the reasons of your patients. What if I, instead of seeing, you didn't say this, but I'm just guessing, what if I didn't see 20 to 25 patients a day? What if I saw 10 that were valuable or 8 that were valuable, right? And so when I look at, I always tell people, be like, well, I love this, this gym you're talking about, and I've seen it on Instagram, and your doctor owns that, and looking for referrals. And I think I told you this a couple of weeks ago. One of the first things I tell people, hey, if you're looking for a doc that's going to give you a pill to make your problems go away, Shawn's not your guy, and not that you don't believe in modern medicine, but your whole premise is lifestyle and wellness. And it's just something that I can wrap my head around. And I think everyone that knows you can. So to take me through, was it hard to transition? I mean, it sounds like it wasn't for you personally, but do you feel like you're trying to win an uphill battle when patients come in, and for your example of, hey, Shawn, I feel like I'm pretty healthy. I go to the gym a couple of days a week, but I'm 50 years old, and you're telling me that I'm pre-diabetic or I'm diabetic, or I've got liver failure or something, that might be lifestyle. Does the modern medicine way of the way society views it, is it making your job at times like, okay, deep breath, I really got to educate this person on the why?
To some extent, yeah. And I think it's just what we've grown to expect out of healthcare,
Yeah,
right? It's the definition we've accepted as good health, right? Like some people would say, hey, I'm healthy. My blood pressure number is good. My cholesterol number is good. My sugar number is good, right? I'm healthy. Well, you're on 4 or 5 pills to make that happen. So,
yeah,
yeah, I suppose you're healthier than if you didn't take those things. But from where I'm standing, real health is to have those numbers being good and not need the pills, right? So there's part of that. There's sort of opening people's eyes to a different way of looking at it. And then, then there's always, say, there's the person whose numbers aren't that far off yet. You know what I mean? Like that maybe they don't exercise enough, a little bit. Maybe they're not massively overweight, but a little bit. And you look at their numbers, and there's nothing that they can say, hey, like this is really out of line. Well, that's when it comes down to, like, there are some things that we can measure in our practice that I think perhaps give you a better indication of overall health than the standard way we look at things, right? The standard way is like, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? What's your blood pressure? And what's your lab values, right? And you say, okay, well, you're probably all right. So, I mean, the things that I like to look at, and things that we have the tools to measure are, how many pounds of muscle is on this person's body? How many pounds of fat is on this person's body? More importantly, how many pounds of visceral fat, like that abdominal fat? And that's the fat, that's the risk factor for diabetes, right? And blood pressure and triglycerides and heart attacks and strokes. Like, it's the bad fat, right?
yeah,
So, and get them on a treadmill and put a mask on them and see how much oxygen their heart and lungs can put out at workload, right? So those are the things to me that give me a better view for how healthy someone is, right? And I know roughly for how many pounds of fat is healthy, and I know how many pounds of visceral fat is healthy, and I know a VO2 max that's healthy, right? And if you don't hit those minimum thresholds, well, you're deconditioned, right? And knowing how many pounds of fat and muscle is way more useful than what's the scale say your total weight is, you know? And the visceral fat too, it's like, okay, I can tell if you're tracking towards diabetes, in a significant period of time before your lab values show you based on that. So then those are measurables that you can say, hey, like, here's where you are, right? And if you could get it to here, then the chances of you having these things go down, and the chances of you having a good quality of life and living longer are a lot higher. And for
Mhm.
some people that resonates, right? Like,
Yeah.
what we do is it's not something that everyone's going to get, you know, but there's enough people who do get it. And once they've done it, they really get it, that, there's a real need for what we're doing. And we've already, we've sort of had the full model of what we're talking about in place for not that long, a couple years, right? But now we're seeing things like a guy who came into my office 15 months ago, um, walked into my office and he had 148.2 pounds of fat on his body, right? Think about that for a second, right? Like, that's a whole person,
Yeah.
the fat on this guy's body, right? Um, well, he was terrified to work out, never been in a gym, terrified that he had damaged himself in a way that was you could never repair. He's about 50, right? Nice guy,
Mhm.
smart guy, never worked out. And the first thing is like, okay, there's nothing you've done to this point that's irreparable. It's all, you're fine. But if you don't change what you're doing, that won't always be the case, right? And then saying, okay, and I said this to him at the time, like, because we're going through all this data. And I say, hey, look, like, you got 148 pounds of fat. And he's like, well, how much fat would be healthy? And I'm like, well, anything that's less than you have is going to be healthier. But the value for someone your height that I think is a value that's consistent with good health is about 50 pounds. He's like, 50 pounds. He's like, that's 100 pounds to lose. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but you're going to do it if you want to. Like, I'll teach you exactly what to do. Our staff will teach you. We will be your biggest cheerleaders, right? We will check in very regularly on your measurables, but you gotta buy in. You gotta want it, and you just have to put in the work, because it's not going to magically happen, right? And he did. So he texted me last week with his most recent scan, and he was at 45 pounds of fat. He went from
Wow.
140 out to 45, dropped 103 pounds of fat, right? And in the process, added about 20 pounds of muscle.
Wow.
And this is a guy who loves to scuba dive, right? This is a guy who has a job that's relatively physical. He's not the same guy. I mean,
Right.
he doesn't look like the same guy, but his confidence is through the roof. And now he's really the mayor of the gym. A guy who could not walk in because he was so scared now is in there training with anyone. And it's just been transformative for him, right? There's been a lot of people that have had journeys like that, and that's really much to your point. Like, before, it's like when I took insurance and had a different model, I had about 4,500 patients in my practice I was looking after. And I had to average 25 to 30 people a day. What it was I had to see 125 people a week, which is 500 a month,
Wow.
to just keep the lights on, basically. So, okay, in a month, I can see 500 people and I can help them a little bit, right? Now, the new model is I might see 6 people a day instead of 30, right? I might see 30 people a week, 120 a month instead of 500. But the sum total of how much I've helped them is, in my mind, way more than before,
Yeah.
right? So, to me, I find that really, really rewarding.
Mhm.
That's kind of why I went into medicine, and it really was to help people change their lives. For me, this is the way to help change their lives. So, it's really, someone walks in the door, and part of it is, how can I help this person? Um, that's my day to day. But then, my big goal is to continue to develop this model and show better health outcomes through data, and to show improved healthcare provider satisfaction, show improved patient satisfaction, show that it's profitable, and then scale it,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, if we can do those things and we can start to scale it and we can start to touch more and more lives and we can go into more states around the country, then we're in the conversation, right? We're in the conversation of maybe the way as a society we're looking at health and wellness and what it means to be healthy and what healthcare should be, we can start to impact that on a big level.
Hmm.
So that's sort of where we're at right now, what we're working towards.
Yeah, I don't think this is amazing information. So thank you for being so transparent. I think a lot of people don't understand what goes on behind the scenes to run the actual business part, of running a general practice and doing what you do. And we'll kind of work into the armory here in a little bit, but this is a good segue into Shawn, which I've been kind of thinking about with you and your model. Where did you learn all this, right? Like, do they teach you this business part of running a practice at med school? Because until you just told me some of this information, I was thinking, okay, Shawn's definitely got a different approach. He's scaling it back to get, I spent an hour with you last, a couple weeks ago, and I know that's your passion, is to help people, like the guy you just mentioned, right? You're not going to be able to help him with a 15-minute check-in and, sorry, you're on the clock, bro, you got to go, I got 17 people behind you. So what affords you to do this, is what I'm hearing you say, is having the fitness part in there, the gyms, the memberships, to be able to offset some of that financial. Did they teach you anything like this in med school?
No,
Where did
no,
you
but
learn all this?
okay, so the sum total of anything business or financial related, anytime through 4 years of medical school and my 3 years of residency, was a 1 hour informal presentation they made about how to medical bill and code, right? So there's just not something that's part of the curriculum, right? And um, most of my friends are people that I went to school with, right, or residency with, and they don't, most of them just don't understand business, and I'm
Sure.
not saying that I do in a good way, right? Um, and I think this is a little bit, change the subject from medicine, but, I think when we, when we see something that we want to do, or we see a system that's broken, sometimes we're pulled to say, hey, what about this, right? What if we change this and we go do this, right? But then there's this moment of like, okay, that's a cool concept, but how do I do it,
Yeah.
right? What are all the things that go into it? And I've always just looked at it this way, just life in general, but especially being a business owner, everything, any time you wake up, what happens in that day is going to be different than what you thought,
Hmm.
right? And there's going to be lots of unexpected things. There's going to be lots of hurdles. Good planning's important, but even more important than that is problem solving, right?
Yeah.
Something pops up and it's a hurdle, and you say, okay, whatever. I'm going to figure out a solution. The solution may be initially obvious, or it might be something you have to go think about for a day or a week or a month. But in my opinion, there's almost no problem that you can't solve if you think about it long enough and you pray about it and you pull in some friends, who know a little bit about it, and you just start talking, and you try a thing and it doesn't work. You try a different thing and it doesn't work. And then eventually you find the thing that works,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's a really important thing to think about when we're trying to pursue a dream that seems difficult. So I mean that's part of it, right? Just that mindset. I think the other thing that helped was, when I've talked to other physicians of mine who are like, I would have liked to done something like this, or sometimes I've been like, hey, you say you like this model, why don't you come join me? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good, but wait, you know what? I got a steady guaranteed paycheck with this nice,
Yeah.
retirement plan, and and these healthcare benefits. Nah, I'm good.
Sure.
So you have to be able to. Well, one of the things you said is bet on yourself, right?
Hmm.
And I'd always rather bet on myself than someone else.
Hmm.
In most scenarios, if I was playing LeBron James in basketball, I'm betting on him. But for the most part, I'm going to bet on myself.
Sure.
But so but my thought is the other thing that can be really helpful if you can detach yourself from financial gain, right? Like when you start to think about things about like how much money am I going to make, or this physical item that I could buy, or this type of stuff that I could do. And you start to think about in terms of like, how do I want to spend my day? You
Mm,
know, what's going to bring me purpose, you
mhm,
know? And that's where you start to put your value and not on the other things. Then you're free to go after
mhm,
that goal, and take that risk. And also if you can say, you know what, if this fails, which, you know, probably at least 50% of my ideas fail,
mhm.
but that's okay. The ones that you learn from that, and you adapt and you grow and you move on. And you don't do that again. So that's my thought. Don't be afraid to fail. You go after this thing and you bet on yourself, and you don't make it about the financial gain. Then you're free. Then you're free to go do the thing. Now that's easy to say, but okay, in my case, like, here's just where I'll kind of put it into financial terms, right? More realistic ones. So I was sitting there in 2016, seeing my 500 patients a month that we talked about. Well, here's the thing, which you probably don't know, and because why would you? But at least at that point in time, in 2016, being in a solo practice without a big contract negotiation, the only way I got paid as a physician is if I was sitting in a room with a patient talking to them, right? So anything else I did, no money associated with that. And the average tab for that is about $68, right? So you just take your $68, you multiply it by your 500 visits a month, and you're somewhere in that $30,000 to $35,000 a month of total receipts you can bring in at any point in time, right? That was just your max, because you can't see 1,000 patients in a month, and you can't charge your own prices. You paid what the insurance company says you get paid. So that's what you have to work with. So
Mhm.
then you have to backtrack all of your expenses and say, this is what I'm left with, right?
Yeah.
So when I started thinking about the medical part of it, now the gym gave me the flexibility to take this risk. I started looking at, okay, well, what if now instead of doing it that way, we charge a membership, right? And then you say, well, if the membership at the time, I forget what we charged, let's say it was $150. And I said, okay, I need to generate 30K in revenue to make the same at $150 a month. I only need 200 people to do that. I got 4,500 in my practice, right? That's like less than one in 20. I need like 5% of my patients to believe in this and
Sure.
want it. And so that's kind of how it went, and I was like, you know what, heck with it, I'm gonna do this thing. And I'm gonna bet on myself. I'm gonna bet I can get 5 or 7% of my patients to see the value in this. um, and not look back. And that's what we did, right? So the first month that we switched the model, we said, we're going to make the switch. We sent out letters to all 4,500 patients. And my thought was, I need 200, I need 200, I need 200 to break even. And we had more than that, right? So
Wow.
day one of switching the model, there was more money coming in, and I had way more time with patients, right? So then I was like, okay, this is fun. Let's keep this going.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's got to be so such a freeing feeling for you too. If, like you said, if I truly remove the money part and focus on the value that you're creating, it's like the rest of it fell into place. And that's what you did, right? You created that value that the customer, in your case, the patient went, uh-huh, I'm in. It's like, I remember when I first found out, and this is a good transition into the Armory, but when you started putting the membership packages for the Armory, I looked at all the options, went, give me top tier. Give me the top tier. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Because as a patient who is aligned with their doctor, as you and I are, and yes, absolutely, sign me up. And I don't even think I use half the options in that membership, right? Um, but that's a good place to again transition into, take the listeners through what this. I feel like this is the first part you talked about was, you know the medical part of it, into the fitness, and then all of a sudden, boom, this model explodes with this idea you have of the Armory. So take the
yeah.
listeners through, how did you come up with this plan and this idea, and what exactly is the Armory, and what's it look like today?
Well, it's still an evolution, right? Like, let's start there, right? It's probably I'm maybe 40% of my big vision,
Wow.
but it's so there's more to come, but it was one part. Let's take a step back and think about this. What constitute good health, right? And what are the common things that people are facing. So, okay, I think it all begins with a good conversation and trust and getting to know each other, right? And being able to have a to be approachable. You can sit down and start talking to someone and they can put their guard down and be real with you, right? And so that's important, right? But once you get past that, then you start to look at common patterns of things that need to be improved upon, right? And common barriers to making those things happen, right? And then you start to think, how can I develop a system to remove each of these barriers and address all of the aspects that make a human being and a human being that's functioning very well, so that was sort of, part of the approach. And then some of it's just over time, just learning, and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and just adapting on the fly, and okay, so like, if we sit back and we start with that and we say, okay, what's a human being need to thrive, right? Like, and here's how I look at that. Like, the day we were born with this body that we live in, this mind that we have that is far more complex and way more intricate and amazing than any machine that's ever been created.
Mm,
Like, and if
yeah.
you start to look at like some things and like, we've created a lot of pretty awesome technology. We've accomplished a lot of things as human beings, right? And we've got some supercomputers that do some really cool things, but we've never created a machine that, if it gets broken, fixes itself in the way that if, I don't know, you fall down and you cut your leg, it heals itself, right? Like, that's pretty freaking amazing,
Yeah.
right? Like, most of our machines require some energy source. Like, if you and I went and we bought a Ferrari, assuming we had the money, which I know I don't, maybe you do, right? And we take it home and we say, this Ferrari's pretty cool, but I'm gonna go put some diesel fuel in it. That Ferrari is permanently ruined until you swap out the engine, right?
Right.
Well, you or me could spend 40 years of our life eating nothing but Fritos and frozen dinners and Coca-Cola, and we'd still function, maybe not at our best. But then all of a sudden, once we put the right fuel in it, all those things heal. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty freaking magical,
It's wild.
you know? And then you start to look at the cellular level, all the processes, and it's just mind blowing. So, so it starts with, the premise of our body is will last us a lifetime and it will function at a very high level with a minimum amount of taking care of itself compared to other things, right? Yeah, there's some stuff that happens, right? We could be hit by a bus, we could get a rare cancer, we could, those type of things that, those things still happen. But for the vast majority of things, it's things are, that what we do determines our outcome, for most things. And it's like, okay, so we need to put the right fuel in it. We need to move it the right amount. We have to weigh the right amount. We have to keep our stress levels in check. So all those things we talked about, and having a team around us that can do that. So if someone's not optimal in one or more areas, we can help them achieve optimization or
Hmm.
something closer to that. So, okay, if you sit down and for example, and you talk to the average patient that walks in the office and you start to dig into their knowledge of nutrition, it's all over the place, right? But for the most part, people just don't know.
Hmm.
They don't know what good nutrition is. So you need to educate them, right? You need to sit down and you need to have a dietitian who can sit down and say, let's talk about this. Let's figure this out, right? And most people, even people who exercise well, there's ways to improve the efficiency of that. There's ways to improve the efficiency of those things. And most of us are banged up. So, really here's what happens. Person comes in, I say, tell me what's going on in your life. Like, what are the things that are causing you your health issues or happiness issues or discomforts? And what to you is the ideal version of health, right? And then I look at some stuff and say, what I'm also saying is what you mentioned, but I'm seeing X, Y, and Z that we need to work into this thing, right? So then it's creating a plan and executing the plan. and creating some obtaining some data that guides what we do. But here's really the let's just focus on weight loss, for example, because it's a tangible topic. Um, People who oftentimes are overweight have tried to lose weight over and over and over again, right? And it just hasn't worked. There's
Hmm.
not a ton of people who are overweight that say, I love this weight. I want to be this weight forever. It's like, yeah, I'm overweight, but I'm filled helpless to fix it,
Hmm.
right? So instead of them shooting in the dark and failing, if you can use science, right? If I can measure their metabolic rate and I can figure out their activity levels and I can look at their other metabolic factors and hormonal factors and all of those things, and you put it all together in a plan, and you give them a plan, and a month later you can show that they've lost 6, 8, 10, 12 pounds, right? They're hooked.
Hmm.
Same thing with um, getting stronger. Like how many people do we know that have spent a year working out and their body didn't change at all? They
Hmm.
didn't get stronger, right? They're fitter, right? But it's just knowing how to give them a plan that allows it that actually works and changes what we're trying to change, but also to do it efficiently,
Hmm.
with less risk of injury and things like that. So that's really what the system is designed to do,
Hmm.
to be able to look in and say, this is a roadmap to accomplish your goal efficiently, safely, quickly, and having the team around you to accomplish that.
Well, I think you just hit the key word there when I think of what you've built at the Armory, almost like your, the second gym, or you could call it 2.0, but it's on the whole new level is team. And,
Yeah.
you know, uh, I'm sure I'm going to miss some things here, but you have, gosh, you built, there's other docs on staff, you have trainers, you have physical therapy, you have recovery, you have a plethora. When I say I haven't used some of the things on the menu, you have, oh gosh, what's that I want to say it's something with an X. What's
So we got the DEXA,
DEXA?
right?
Yeah, yeah,
DEXA
yeah.
body
That's
comps, right?
I've heard you talk about that a lot on social media. So yeah, you've invested a lot into these tools that you just bring someone through the door. So you have your expertise on the how, and you're
Yeah.
taking their why of like, okay, well, I want to be happier and have more energy and sleep better and all these things. And then you get to take the how and all these tools, and that's what I love about the Armory. Is you mentioned the word team, is you hired this or built this sort of dream team to help people accomplish these
Yeah.
goals, right? For somebody that's coming in that says, hey, I'm maintaining, I want to get 5 or 10% stronger in this area based on this test result, versus the guy you just mentioned, right? I lost 100 pounds of fat and I'm gaining 20 pounds of muscle. Like that's the team, right? Like that's everything.
It
That's,
is.
if you put yourself in that system, I mean, look what can happen. It's extremely inspiring to watch what the Armory is doing for people.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I think a lot of it is like a lot of what we're doing is not something that I learned, right, in formal education or that's taught in formal education across any discipline, right? And this could be as a physician or it could be as a physical therapist or as a dietitian or something. Like it's not necessarily common curriculum. So the way I was fortunate enough, here's how I kind of was able to gain a better understanding of this. And here's the thing that bothers me about modern medicine. One of the things is that it's also segmented and separate, right? Like, okay, you got a physician, right? And you've got a fitness people, and maybe if you got a physical therapist here, maybe you got a dietitian, they're not in the same office. They don't talk. They don't coordinate. They don't even know that the other things exist,
Right.
right? Like, so it's just fragmented. And so then the real insight was like looking at, if you just want to think of this thing as human performance and optimizing human performance for any individual, depending on what their goals are, right? Look at who does it the best. And I started to look at high end athletics, right? Like, uh, let's take the NFL, for example, right? Let's say that you're an NFL franchise and you are uh, drafting a player and signing them to a contract that's worth tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Okay.
So you've got this person that you've invested in, and what you need this person to do is, well, one, they need to not get injured. They got to stay on the field, right? You want them to have a long career, play as many years as they can and perform at the highest level possible, right? So
Yeah.
with those goals in mind, with the type of budgets they have, they've been able to look differently in human performance, right? So, like if you're an NFL player, you will have your team physician, right? You will have an athletic trainer. You will have a physical therapist. You will have a strength coach. You probably have a speed coach. There's going to be a sports scientist on staff, right? Uh, Physical therapist, dietitian, all of these people are working in conjunction and they're talking on a daily basis to optimize each individual on that team's human performance,
Hmm.
right? So you look at that and you start to say, gosh, in a NFL franchise, they're going to use a DEXA scan because they need to know how many pounds of muscle and fat their linebacker has, right?
Hmm.
And they're going to need to know how strong that athlete's hamstrings are to see if they're symmetrical or if he's going to get injured this year,
Hmm.
right? And they are going to prescribe them a nutrition plan, right? And they're going to make them do certain recovery modalities. And it's like, hey, if you skip your massage on Monday, that's a $5,000 fine,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
If you skip your cold tub, it's a fine. If you come in 3 pounds overweight, it's a fine, right? That's how they enforce it. But the reason they have those fines is they know that if the person does all those things, then they'll have optimal performance and they'll get a return on their investment, right? So
Yeah.
that's so then I look and I say, huh, that team's pretty cool. Like that team approach, right?
Yeah.
The science that they use to make that happen is also really cool. But there's nothing unique about the number one pick in the NFL draft from a physiology standpoint. It's the exact same as you or me or your grandma or my 10-year-old daughter, right? It's all human physiology. It's just knowing the science and applying it differently, right?
Hmm.
And having a team of people that know how to do that, right? And this comes back to my point. Like I couldn't just hire any old personal trainer because they've never been in that environment. I had to hire strength coaches who have been strength coaches in the NFL, right, or at a Power Five uh, program,
Hmm.
right. So that's what I did, right. I needed a physical therapist that has been in that environment, so I went out and recruited one, right.
Yeah.
Same with a dietitian. So because when they come in, they can look at healthcare in a different way. Now I have to sometimes get them on course and say, hey, we're not talking about a 24-year-old elite athlete, right? We're talking about a 65-year-old woman who just wants to complete a 5K,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But so think about your audience, but we can use
Sure.
that same team approach and those same tools, and that's how what happens, right? All of a sudden now, the guy who's 148 pounds of fat walks in, and I apply the same science and the same team that I don't know CJ Stroud is getting at the Houston Texans, right? And then that's how we can lose 103 pounds of fat in a little over a year, so that's been my learning process, and thirst for knowledge is looking outside of traditional medicine and saying who is doing things at a really high level, what can I learn from that, and how can I translate that into everybody else.
Mm.
To some extent, what the Armory is an NFL training facility and healthcare team that is for you, right? For any person. And um, so, yeah, that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are and the mindset of what we're trying to do moving forward. And I know over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, God willing, that we're going to learn more and more about
Mm.
this, right? And we're going to fine tune it. We're going to figure out other things too, because some of it's too, it's how do you motivate someone, right? Because that's different for everyone,
Sure.
right? How do you motivate someone? How do you provide them the positive feedback to keep going? Um, so that's just it's that's what makes it so fun, because there's always a challenge. There's things to learn, and at the end of the day, we're helping people have a better quality of life, and I mean, that could be more fun than that, more satisfying than that, really.
Well, that's just it. You get a front row seat to that, right? To see those results, and that's what I like about the culture there, Sean, is that it's no secret you are training current athletes at the professional level You go to the gym, you see former collegiate athletes who are now at the next level. Maybe they have the summer off, and so there is that level there, but it's also guys like me, right? And they're in the mid 40s in there. And I was in there a couple of weeks ago, and it was a different time than I normally am. And there was a guy in there in his 70s in fantastic shape. To I
Yeah.
think of 6 a.m. when, one of your consistent trainers that's always in there early, she has a group of women in there, middle-aged women. And it's just like
Yeah.
it's a beautiful mix of culture of, it's not intimidating. I think a lot of people look at some of the big box gyms that you and I used to work out at, and it can be, like you said, everyone's fighting for that one squat rack, or,
Yeah.
it can be an intimidating atmosphere. And when I've heard that from more than one person
Yeah.
over the years. So it's, I think, refreshing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of them knew you as their patient first, right? Until you, like you said,
Yeah.
you sent out a letter to 4,500 people, but it was also 4,500 people that trusted you. Um, and so Shawn, two follow up questions to kind of what you've built. We've talked about the lifestyle of wellness practice. How important? I don't know that this is talked about enough, and I've really started unpacking it in my personal life. What's your opinion? How important when we think of recovery is sleep?
Oh man, it's got to be right up
It's a
there amongst.
superpower, right?
Well, it really is, right? And here's the thing, like you could cold plunge all day, right? You can get massages, you can even have your nutrition dialed in and everything. But if you're sleeping 4 hours a night, your performance is going to be terrible, right?
Yeah,
You're going to get injured, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, if there's one thing, like I would say that the two biggest things that if you say recovery wise, what are the two biggest things? One's going to be sleep, and one that's maybe 1A, and 1B is going to be your nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you can get those two things locked in, and then I would say the third might be stress levels,
Okay.
so if you can dial those three in, then the rest is just creating efficiencies,
Mm,
and optimizing, going from like let's just pick some abstract percentages because sometimes I like to do that. Let's say 50% of recovery is sleep. Let's say 40% is nutrition, and 5% stress or something like that. The other 5% is going to be a combination of all the other stuff.
mm-hmm.
So in some ways, like if you're sleeping 3 hours a night, you can cold plunge, as much as you want, and your recovery is going to be terrible.
Sure, sure. Thank you. And then the second one, and I know you and I've talked about this a little bit, and it's part of your practice, is, and maybe this has a lot to do with stress, as you kind of highlighted a little bit, but take me through like the parallels of where the physical fitness lines up with mental health. And
Oh gosh.
and I know you have probably dozens of stories over the years where you've been able to direct your patients to recover in that aspect and that angle. So kind of take me on. I know we could probably be,
Wow.
yeah, that's a whole nother episode, but
We could do, I bet we could do two or three podcasts on that alone, breaking it down, right?
sure.
Because there is you know, like just say mental health and fitness, right? Well, there are all kinds of mental health issues we caused by fitness and
Mm,
Instagram and things, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So there's, yeah, I could talk about it for a long time, but really, here's the thing. What we know is that as human beings, we were designed to move,
mm,
right? All of our ancestors up until very recently moved. They hunted, they gathered, they tried to stay alive, or even once you got past that stage, we're working in the fields, right?
sure.
We're building things. So that's just part of who we are. And if we don't do that, it's not good for our mental health. But we also know that if you and I go in and we have a really good workout and we push ourselves hard, we're going to release dopamine and we're going to release serotonin, we're going to release norepinephrine, and all of these natural antidepressants. They're the same um, hormones in our body that antidepressant medicines raise, right? So if we, so I really think physical activity is paramount for our mental health,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and for a wide variety of reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Shawn, when I think about everything you're doing, my mind can't help it. I always love to just take a step back and just admire people's journeys, especially yours is mixed with not only your profession of the medical side and the wellness side, but also as an entrepreneur. Watching you, uh, I guess the word blossom into what you've built the past couple of years. Really with the armory. But even beyond that, the past 10 years, as you've blended physical fitness and wellness in with your practice, you got a lot going on. And, we haven't even talked about, you wear a couple of different hats outside. I know the volleyball team is the Columbus Fury. You got the Wizards home court now at the Armory. Anyone that stepped foot in there, it's obvious with all the pictures on the walls around the gym that, the kids programs are very important to you. You've got a lot of basketball programs and former players coming in. I think every time I'm in there, there's one of the trainers is on the court with either a collegiate athlete or maybe two or three kids in there working on their dribbling skills, or, there's a lot going on program wise too with what you've built. For you personally, how do you decompress? It's obvious if you're in there at 5, 6 in the morning, Dr. Bailey's in there clanging and banging, as The Rock says, with some weights. But aside from that, I guess I'll ask you that one first, and I've got a follow up about it. How
Okay.
do you decompress?
Well, well, I'll tell you. Since we opened the Armory, which has been, gosh, I guess we didn't even open it till December, and now we're talking here mid July. So what? It's been maybe 8 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we really started this journey in May the year before, 15 months ago, or whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I realized how stressful it was going to be, and how much was going to be into it, and how much of myself I'd have to pour into it. And maybe 3 weeks ago, I had realized that my tank was empty,
Mm,
right? I had drained it, and I had not recharged my battery. And it was wearing on me. Like, I wasn't being me, let's put it that way.
mhm.
So that's kind of, so even though this is what I do and believe in, I had gotten off track myself,
Sure.
but once I realized that, that comes back to your question, how do I recharge? Right. So I'm kind of naturally more of an introverted person, right? Like, being a doctor and being an encourager at the gym, and a lot of these hats that I have to wear, you have to be personable, you have to talk, like you have to listen, right? You have to interact, and those things I've learned how to do them, but they can be very draining to me. So I know that I am going to need a certain amount of alone time, like alone, quiet time to recover from that. So that's really important for me. I also love to be in nature, and if you, it doesn't really matter what kind of nature it is, but if I'm just alone outside of humanity,
Mhm.
and outside of what men have made, and can look at, uh, you know, the natural side of things, that is recharging for me. So
Sure.
my one of my favorite things to do is, I love to be by bodies of water. So
Mm,
I love to just, we were fortunate enough to get a lake house several years back. So I like to just kind of sit up there and look at the water, go swimming, and hang out with my
mm.
kids, but lifting weights is a big thing too. Like
Sure.
if I miss a day, I'm okay. If I miss 2 days, I quickly am not myself, so I like to read,
Mhm.
that type of stuff, listen to music. But that's kind of how I recharge.
Yeah. No, I totally, something about the water, I think I've talked to a lot of people over the years that it's something good for the soul, and so refreshing too. Like you said, I mean, once we're in that daily wellness practice, if you miss a day or two of the gym, that's usually the easy fix. But I think for anyone, and the listeners probably can relate, if we can get alone in nature, if we're fortunate enough to get near water, yeah, that's such a good pick me up, and just get quiet. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Shawn, I know your wife is also in the medical field as a pharmacist. So I guess kind of take me through. That's a whole nother when I when I was thinking about you and your what I know about your personal life, and I know you're a big family man. Or what are some healthy boundaries that you guys have set at home? I know she's busy running that part of
Oh
her
yeah.
of her life, and you've are over here. I know you guys are partners in this, but
Sure.
were there just, hey, healthy boundaries we've got to set for home, right? Like conversations of, we can't talk about work at home, or how did you guys navigate
Oh
and
gosh.
you've got kids to chase around and activities, and so how challenging was that to kind of lean into and say, be intentional about keeping that part of your life healthy?
It's always a work in progress, right?
Sure.
Like any relationship is. And I don't know, my wife, she's an amazing woman. She is really smart. She's really kind. She's really fun. She's an amazing mom. She's a really good businesswoman. Um, and if she's a pharmacist, she's a fantastic pharmacist too, So sometimes it's always interesting to see your significant other in their element. So if I walk into the pharmacy and I just kind of a fly on the wall and I'm like, wow, she's really good at what she does, which is pretty cool. But I mean, I think the thing for us, we both believe in the model of healthcare, right? So that's allowed us to do this together and grow together as a result of it instead of growing in two separate directions, which has been important. We've always shared a love of nature and of being outside and of physical fitness. And I mean, I think one of our first dates was going to the gym, and I think
Yeah.
up until the time we had kids, we worked out together quite a bit. So we always shared that. There's a lot of things we share in common. So I mean, that's always helped. We both love the water. We love to go boating. We love to just so we have all those things in common. We both love to be around our kids, but it's kind of hard because she owns a business and um, she works really hard with that. And but we just kind of pull together. We just kind of do our own things, but also help the other person out, and we seek each other out for guidance, support when we need it. And I think the common thing is we both share the love of our children and the desire to put them before anything else. And that sometimes she's busy at work and that's me, and a lot of times I'm busy at work and that's her. And we've got a lot of really loving family members that help us out on that too. I think we both share the same faith, and that's really important too. So yeah, I don't know. She's an amazing person. I'm really lucky to have her in my life. Um, but nothing's perfect, right? It's just keep working, trying to grow as a person. Me personally, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father, right? And you get better, you make some improvements, but we can practice it at our skills to the day we die, and we're never going to be a finished product. So
Right. Right. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Dr. Bailey, I've got two final questions for you. My
let's hear him, Mike.
All right. The first one is, as you look back on what you've built, really with, again, the wellness practice kind of married up with, the medical practice. What's one thing you've learned about yourself as you've gone through this experience?
Oh gosh, one, I'm not perfect, right? I make a lot of mistakes. So I've learned that. I've also learned that I'm resilient, that I can make a mistake and um, more often than not fix it or make it right or find a way around it. Um, and I guess like I never really saw myself in the past as particularly driven or you know inspiring to other people. But as things have progressed and I've gone down this journey, I think I've realized that something's really important to me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that end goal. And I also have realized that I can inspire people to want to achieve, and want to be healthy and want to take that step towards wellness. And um, so I don't know. That's a couple things that come to mind off the top of my head.
Last question for you, Shawn. What advice would you give to someone who is hearing the whisper of a dream, but it just seems too crazy to chase?
Well, I think you absolutely. I'm not sure there's a dream out there that's too crazy that you can't accomplish it, right? Like, but you need to know going into it that it's going to be a long, long journey, right? And that's probably going to be harder than you think. Uh, and it's going to be more hurdles to cross. And that the end result of that dream is not going to be the same as what you pictured when you started, right? But you have to be willing to sacrifice to dedicate your whole being existence to tracking that down that dream. Be incredibly resilient when things don't go well. Be able to take criticism and respond with kindness, and learn from it, and just keep plugging away until you get there. So that'd be my thought for someone who says, "Hey, I want to go do this thing." Bet on yourself, right? You said that earlier. Bet on yourself, um, and then do whatever it takes to get there.
Dr. Shawn Bailey, thank you so much for being here on Dare to Daydream. I know this has been just a wealth of information that I'm sure, much like myself, the listeners will have to go back and listen to a couple of times to digest it all. It was so valuable. So, Shawn, thanks again for being here with me today.
I appreciate it, Mike. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day, my friend.
You too, brother.
Okay, I'll see you.